Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Wilkshire. Thank you for tuning in to our bilingual storytime event. Je m'appelle Claire Wilkshire. Merci de votre participation à notre heure du conte bilingue. This last fall, thanks to generous funding from the Canada Council for the Arts, Breakwater Books published The Ice Shack, an English translation of the French children's book La Cabane from Bouton, Acadie. Today, author Katia Canciani and translator Jocelyne Thomas will share the exciting tale of Alphonse the Fisherman in both French and English. Following the readings, we'll talk a little bit about the ideas in the story and where it came from. À l'automne, grâce à l'appui généreux du Conseil des arts du Canada, The Ice Shack apparu avec Breakwater Books. Il s'agit d'une traduction du livre pour enfants La Cabane des éditions Bouton d'Acadie. Aujourd'hui, auteur Katia Canciani et traductrice Jocelyne Thomas partageront l'histoire stimulante du pêcheur Alphonse en français et en anglais. Après, nous parlerons un peu de l'origine de l'histoire et des idées que nous y trouvons. First up is Katia Canciani reading from La Cabane in French. Écoutons d'abord Katia Canciani qui vous présentera La Cabane en français.
Merci, Claire. Thank you, Claire. So, reading now this amazing book, and I'm so glad to be here with all of you. Alors, je vous lis La Cabane, un texte de Katia Canciani, illustré par Christian Kennel. Ayant passé tout l'été à construire sa nouvelle cabane de pêche, Alphonse a hâte que l'hiver arrive. Il ne manque plus que le froid pour faire son bonheur. He's working hard. Lorsque la baie gèle enfin, Alphonse commence à pêcher. Forcément, avec une aussi jolie cabane, il va gagner le concours du meilleur pêcheur. Mais le vieux homme a beau utiliser ses meilleurs appâts, ses plus beaux fils, ses techniques éprouvées, aucun poisson ne mord à ses hameçons.
Parfois, ses amis lui rendent visite. Alors, mon Alphonse, ça mord?
Sacré sourcil! Rien! Pas même un pneu, une chaussette ou une vieille paire de bobettes. C'est curieux, avec une si belle cabane, les poissons devraient mordre. Ses amis repartent en hochant la tête. Alphonse est toutefois bien déterminé à prouver qu'il est le meilleur pêcheur. Il garde les yeux ouverts, il en oublie même de dormir. Voyons voir s'il va être fatigué. Au bout d'un mois, Alphonse n'a toujours rien pris. Pas même le plus petit des petits éperlans. Jamais la pêche n'a été si ennuyeuse, si bien qu'un soir, fatigué d'espérer, il s'endort sur sa chaise. Ses amis viennent souvent le voir, mais constatant qu'il dort, ils murmurent. Il a dû pêcher toute la nuit, laissons-le se reposer. Alphonse dort tant et tant que le printemps se pointe le bout du nez. Il se met à faire son travail de printemps. Que fait le printemps? Un doux matin, de très tôt matin, par très grand vent, le morceau de glace sur lequel est posée la cabane se détache. « Alphonse !» crient ses amis. Il crie et il crie, mais le pêcheur ne se réveille pas. Alphonse est à la dérive. Qui sait où il va s'arrêter? Porté par les forts courants et par les vents, Alphonse dérive. Voyons voir jusqu'où il va aller. Lorsque le pêcheur ouvre enfin les yeux, bien reposé, le paysage a beaucoup changé. Un paquebot s'est arrêté en plein milieu de l'océan. Des hommes s'agitent sur le pont. « Hé, oh, ça va ?» leur demande Alphonse, qui est pourtant bien mal pris. « On est en panne et on n'a pas la pièce pour réparer la fournaise, » répond le capitaine. « Que vous faudrait-il? Un bout de tuyau !» Alphonse entre dans sa cabane, détache le tuyau du poêle et l'offre au capitaine. « Tenez, je n'en aurai plus besoin, il fait si chaud !» En effet, il fait très chaud. Trop chaud pour une petite banquise. Avec sa cabane sans tuyau de poêle, la banquise continue de dériver. Elle heurte un rocher sur lequel repose un nid d'oiseau gardé par une scientifique. « Hé, oh, ça va ?» lui demande Alphonse, qui est pourtant bien mal pris. « C'est la dernière couvée de cette espèce en voie de disparition et je n'ai rien pour la sauver, » répond la jeune femme. « Que vous faudrait-il? Un abri pour la protéger des prédateurs et des tempêtes? » Alphonse entre dans sa cabane, soulève le poêle et l'offre à la scientifique. « Tenez, je n'en aurai plus besoin, il fait si chaud !» Avec sa cabane sans tuyau de poêle et sans poêle, la banquise continue de dériver. Alphonse atteint bientôt une île minuscule. Une famille à l'air épuisé le salue. « Hé, oh, ça va ?» leur demande Alphonse, qui est pourtant bien mal pris. « Notre maison a été emportée par un ouragan, » explique la mère. « Que vous faudrait-il? Du bois pour la reconstruire, » répond le père. Le pêcheur regarde sa jolie cabane. Il sourit. « Tenez, je n'en aurai plus besoin. Il fait si chaud. » Mais avant même que la famille n'ait le temps de remercier Alphonse, la mère se lève et emporte la banquise. C'est alors que le pêcheur remarque qu'il ne reste plus qu'un petit bout de glace, tout juste suffisant pour sa petite chaise. Oh! Et oh, ça ne va pas, lance Alphonse, qui se trouve bien mal pris. Au moment même où la chaise va sombrer, une baleine recueille le pêcheur sur son dos. Elle entreprend de le ramener à bon port. « Sapré sourcil !» s'exclame Alphonse. « Quelle histoire de pêche !» Au bout d'un moment, la baleine dépose le vieil homme près de chez lui. Lorsqu'Alphonse arrive à la nage avec sa chaise, ses amis n'en croient pas leurs yeux. Le pêcheur est de retour, mais sans sa jolie cabane. Pendant les heures qui suivent, Alphonse leur raconte comment il a sauvé un paquebot, des oiseaux et une famille sur un îlot, avant d'être pêché par une baleine. Et c'est ainsi qu'Alphonse reçoit le prix du meilleur pêcheur? Non, non, le prix du meilleur conteur. Et voilà pour la cabane en français.
Merci beaucoup, Katia. Thank you very much. Maintenant que vous avez entendu l'histoire, je vais vous parler un peu de l'auteur. Now that you've heard the story, I'll tell you a bit about the author. When she was a little girl, Katia read constantly. After reading all those adventure novels, she decided it was time to live an adventure of her own, and she became a pilot. Year after year, she traveled and flew, and her head became like a very busy airport hall, ideas taking off one after the other. Since her sky was getting a bit too full, she decided to land all her planes on paper. Katia has since published 36 books for children, and she spends her time flying planes and meeting kids in schools. She lives in Gatineau, Quebec. Petite, Katia est passionnée de lecture. Ayant lu un gros tas de romans, elle souhaite vivre sa propre aventure et donc elle devient pilote. Les voyages s'accumulent d'année en année et son cerveau devient comme un aéroport où les idées arrivent et s'envolent les uns après les autres. Son ciel devient de plus en plus encombré par toutes ces idées et Katia décide de poser tous ces avions sur papier. Elle a publié 36 livres pour enfants. Elle passe son temps à piloter des avions et à rencontrer des enfants dans les écoles. Elle habite Gatineau, Québec.
Merci, Claire.
Merci. So now we're ready to hear a reading from the Ice Shack in English. Nous allons écouter Jocelyne Thomas, traductrice, qui va lire en anglais.
Hello, everybody. This is The Ice Shack, written by Katia Canciani, translated by myself, Jocelyne Thomas, and illustrated by Christian Quenel. And so, let's start the story in English. Having spent all summer building his new ice fishing shack, Alphonse can't wait for winter to arrive. All he needs now to be happy is the cold weather. Once the bay has finally iced over, Alphonse starts fishing. Of course, with such a lovely shack, he's definitely going to win the best fisherman contest. In spite of using his best lures, his most beautiful lines, his tried and true techniques, not one fish lands on his hook. Sometimes his friends stop by for a visit. So, Alphonse, any bites? Jumpin' gibberin', nothing. Not even an old tire, a sock, or worn out pair of underpants. It's so strange with such a lovely shack. The fish should be biting, declare his friends before leaving. His friends depart, shaking their heads. Alphonse is still determined to prove he's the best fisherman. He stays alert, watching for fish. He even forgets to sleep. For a month, Alphonse still hasn't caught a thing. Not even the tiniest of tiny smelts. Never has fishing been so boring. So boring, in fact, that one evening, tired of hoping for a tug on the line, Alphonse falls asleep in his chair. His friends still come by to visit. When they see that he's sleeping, they murmur to each other, "He must have been up all night fishing. Let's let him rest." Alphonse sleeps so much, for so long, that springtime starts to peek around the corner, and then starts to do its springtime thing, warming and thawing and melting. Softly one morning, early one morning, as the winds rise high and blow a gale, the piece of ice that the shack sits on breaks away and starts to float free. "Alphonse!" cries friends. They yell and shout, but the fisherman doesn't wake up. Carried by the wind and the strong currents, Alphonse drifts. Who knows where he will go? When the fisherman, well rested, finally opens his eyes, the scenery has really changed. A steamship is floating there, right in the middle of the ocean. The men on the deck are running about, flustered and upset. "Hey ho! Is everything okay?" asks Alphonse, in spite of being in a jam himself. "We've broken down, and we don't have what we need to repair the furnace," the captain replies. "What do you need?" "A piece of pipe." Alphonse goes into his shack, takes the pipe off the wood stove, and offers it to the captain. "Here, I won't need it anymore. It's so hot out." He's right, it's quite hot out. too hot for little ice floe. With his little shack now missing a stovepipe, the ice continues to drift. It bumps up against a rock where a scientist is watching over a seabird's nest. Hey, ho! Is everything okay? Asks Alphonse, in spite of being in a jam himself. This is the last nest of eggs of this endangered species, and I don't have anything to save it with, says the young woman. What do you need? A shelter to protect it from predators and storms. Alphonse goes into the shack and hauls out the stove and offers it to the scientist. Here, I won't need this anymore. It's so hot out. With the shack now missing a stovepipe and a stove, the ice floe drifts away again. Soon Alphonse floats up near a tiny island. An exhausted family greets him. Hey, ho, is everything okay? Asks Alphonse, in spite of being in a jam himself. Our house was carried away by a hurricane, explains the mother. What do you need? Some wood to rebuild it, answers the father. The fisherman looks at his beautiful shack. He smiles. Here, I won't need this anymore. It's so hot out. Before the family even has time to thank Alphonse, the sea rises and carries the ice floe away. The fisherman suddenly realizes that there's only a small piece of ice left, just enough for his chair. Hey ho, this isn't good, says Alphonse to himself. I'm in a jam myself. Just as the chair is about to sink under the waves, a whale surfaces beneath Alphonse, taking him up on her back. She offers to take him back to safe harbor. Jumping, gibbering, what a fishtail, shouts Alphonse. At the end of a long journey, the whale drops the old man off near his home. Watching Alphonse swim up to the shore with his chair, his friends can't believe their eyes. The fisherman is back, but his beautiful shack. Over the next couple of hours, Alphonse tells the tale of how he saved a scene ship, some birds, and a family on a tiny island before being fished up by a whale. And that's how Alphonse wins the prize for the best fisherman? Storyteller. The end.
Thank you very much, Jocelyne.
De rien.
So that was translator Jocelyne Thomas. Jocelyn comes from a bilingual family, and she grew up reading and hearing stories in both French and English from an early age. She loves stories that draw from the history and the culture of an area and its people. And even as an adult, she always wants just one more story. A huge word nerd and a language enthusiast, she is a trained folklorist, editor, and researcher. She likes nothing better than reading all day, fortified by cups of tea. Donc, Jocelyne Thomas, traductrice, elle a grandi à Terre-Neuve au sein d'une famille bilingue. Dès son plus jeune âge, elle lisait et écoutait des histoires en français et en anglais. Elle adore les histoires qui sont enracinées dans l'histoire et la culture d'une région, de son peuple. Même adulte, elle a toujours envie de lire encore une petite histoire. Grande amateur des mots et des langues, elle est folkloriste, réviseur et chercheuse de formation. Son plus grand plaisir est de dévouer sa journée à une lecture ponctuée de tasses de thé. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à vous deux pour ces belles lectures. And let's just jump right into some questions. Katia, I'd like to start with you and ask where the inspiration for this story came from. On va passer donc tout de suite aux questions en demandant à Katia d'où vient l'inspiration pour cette histoire.
Before we start, I just want to say it was the first time I heard the story in English, and Jocelyn, it was just amazing. I'm so happy and so proud. To me, this is like such a gift. So thanks so much. I'm delighted right now. Mais pour répondre à la question, Claire, et je vais répondre en français et peut-être qu'il y a d'autres questions que je vais répondre en anglais. Mais pour répondre à cette question, en fait, c'est assez drôle parce que l'inspiration de cette histoire m'est venue alors que j'étais invitée à un événement littéraire au Saguenay, au Québec, un endroit où il y a beaucoup de maisons de pêche sur la glace, sur la baie. Et en allant à cet événement littéraire, il y avait dans une des salles une exposition de photographies de cabanes de pêche. Et dans ma tête à moi, une cabane de pêche, c'était quelque chose d'un peu ordinaire auquel je n'avais jamais porté attention. Mais tout à coup, j'étais entourée de 200 photos de cabanes de pêche. Et c'est là que j'ai réalisé que chaque cabane était unique, que chaque cabane, en fait, représentait le pêcheur qui l'avait construite ou qui l'avait arrangée de façon très personnelle et pratiquement amoureuse. On voyait que les pêcheurs aimaient leur cabane de pêche. Et c'est ce qui m'a donné l'idée, la première idée pour écrire cette histoire d'un pêcheur qui veut construire sa cabane et l'avoir la plus belle possible pour essayer de gagner le concours du meilleur pêcheur. Mais finalement, quand j'ai commencé à écrire l'histoire, c'est devenu quelque chose de de très différent en fait. Ça a parlé d'autre chose que la pêche. Et donc, mais ça a été le début de l'histoire, ça a été cette exposition de photographies qui m'a fait réaliser que les cabanes de pêche, c'est vraiment spécial.
C'est super intéressant tout ça. Quelle belle idée, l'exposition. Ça nous montre vraiment que parfois nous avons des idées, parfois nous ne comprenons pas nécessairement l'individualité des choses, n'est-ce pas? Oui. Excellent, super, merci beaucoup. Une autre question est pour, je ne sais pas, ça pourrait être pour Jocelyne ou pour Katia. Alphonse, le personnage principal, il fait de la pêche sur glace. Est-ce que c'est une activité à laquelle vous deux avez participé comme enfant? Est-ce que vous attachez une importance culturelle à la pêche sur glace? So, in the story, Alphonse is a ice fisherman, and I'd like to know if you went ice fishing when you were younger, or maybe you go now. And does the practice of ice fishing hold any specific cultural significance for you?
Jocelyn, you go first.
Okay, I'll answer in English, but there will be some French in there as well. I have to say thank you for this story as well, Katia, because when I first read it in French, when it was first proposed to me to translate it, I really loved it. I have a young child myself, and it's the kind of story that I would read with him. But for myself, I loved it because it speaks to the cultural background, and it's not specific to a region, even though it is specific to a region, because ice fishing is something we do here. So I have experienced ice fishing, oddly enough. When I was a child, my mother would take us ice fishing. We would get up at 5:30 in the morning and go to a pond when they still froze. And she would cut the big holes in the ice, and we would bring our skates and we would skate, and I can't remember if we caught anything. It wasn't fishing on the ocean, but it was ice fishing on a pond, but it was still ice fishing. And it was interesting because Mom is from Marseille. She's from France. She did not grow up with ice fishing, but she's spent the better part of her life here, more than 50 years, and has always wanted to do all the things. And so she would take us ice fishing. So I had these memories of ice fishing. So I read it and I was like, that would be even more fantastic, because we never had a shack. So we sat on, we had things to sit on the ground. But reading that, I was like, I wish we had an ice shack, because when you're, 10, 12 years old, you want to take a break, you want a shack to sit. So I loved it. So that's my experience with ice fishing. So it did bring back some memories. And I don't remember ever catching a fish. Maybe we caught one. But it was the whole experience. A whale, imagine. A big, I wouldn't mind, I don't know what I'd do with a whale, but a big fish out of a pond would be nice. But yeah, the ice shack, it really spoke to me on a bunch of different levels. So I was quite pleased.
That's really great. That's a great story. And actually, from my side, Claire, I've never been ice fishing, and I guess my parents also come from France, and it was not something they would have been used to do. And we actually never went ice fishing. But I remember I've lived quite a few places in Canada. I've lived in Nova Scotia, and I've traveled all over Canada. And for me, those ice shacks, like they're always like those small, like they're really small houses on the ice. This is it's almost lyrical. Like it's really funny when you see it with, you know, like with an outside eye. So to me, it's always something that I was interested in, but you know, never did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I find it very, very amazing that, you know, we do that in Canada. You know, we actually build those tiny little houses that we, you know, like some of them are
on the ice.
decorated,
Yeah.
and we put them on the ice and we go fishing. I mean, to me, this is like, you know, how much more Canadian can you be? Or, you know,
Yeah. Go and sit out in the freezing cold on the ice in a little fort.
Yeah, but it's really about the adventure and about, you know, like being one with nature and being there, even though it's cold outside, you know, like it doesn't matter. This is part of who we are. So yeah, but sadly, no, I've never been ice fishing, so it's still on my bucket list.
There's lots of time. I think you should give it a try.
And more mittens.
So too.
Okay. Something else I'd like to ask is about the idea in the story of generosity. There is an important message of generosity there, and Alphonse loves his beautiful little shack, but he willingly gives it away bit by bit to other people who are in need until finally he's left with nothing. But at the end, he's happier than he was at the beginning. So the story seems to be saying that it's not what you have, but what you give that matters. So I'm wondering if you could say something about why that message is important to get across to children. So I'll just ask the question in French as well. Un message important dans l'histoire est la générosité. Alphonse adore sa belle cabane à pêche, mais il offre un morceau à la fois à des gens qui ont besoin d'aide jusqu'à ce qu'elle ait complètement disparu. À la fin, il ne lui reste plus un bout de sa cabane, mais il est plus heureux qu'au début de l'histoire. Donc, selon l'histoire, on dirait ce n'est pas ce qu'on possède qui compte, mais c'est ce qu'on donne. Et pourquoi, je voudrais savoir, est-il important de communiquer ce message aux enfants?
It's funny because at first, when I start, like whenever I write a story, I don't write it with an intent. Like, so I didn't started writing La Cabane thinking, this is the message I want, you know, I want to get through at all. I just, but in the end, when I read what I write, it just transpires from me, you know, like what my values are. And obviously one of the things that's very important to me and that transpired through this story is generosity. So, and I think it's important that, and the kids, it's funny because they know it. They know that it's not what they possess. Let's say they're in school and they have something to themselves. They're not going to be as happy as when they actually share with their friends or give something. And they already know that. So this story kind of amplifies it and you know, make it kind of whimsical. But you know, my young readers, they know that. They know that giving makes them happy. You know, when they're sharing, it makes them happy. So it's funny because I don't write with an intent, but I think as authors, you know, what's inside of actually transpires in the end. It, you know, it comes out in our books in the way we write and the, you know, what we put in. Et pour moi, et je continue un peu en français, pour moi, la générosité, c'est vraiment ce qui nous rend le plus humain. En fait, de donner, c'est quelque chose qui nous rend tellement heureux, qui nous apporte tellement de bonheur, que je crois que c'est en fait quelque chose qui nous lie tous les humains ensemble. C'est cette capacité qu'on a à être bon l'un envers l'autre et ce qu'on en retire souvent, on le réalise même pas. Mais c'est un sentiment absolument extraordinaire et je voulais en quelque sorte montrer que quand on donne, et cet Alphonse est un exemple de générosité parce que plus il donne, en fait, plus il réalise que sa cabane, en fait, elle était là pour servir aux autres et c'est encore mieux comme ça. Donc c'est ça pour moi, oui, effectivement, au lieu, et c'est drôle parce que les gens qui prennent le livre vont croire que c'est une histoire qui parle que de pêche. Mais non, j'ai amené autre chose là-dedans et je parle vraiment de valeurs humaines, en fait, ce qui nous tisse entre nous, les humains.
Si je peux dire, je pense que ça ressort dans mes études de folklore, surtout dans les histoires, les contes traditionnels par exemple, Jack, Bill and Tom, les histoires des trois frères qui vont dans les bois ou qui vont faire quelque chose. Et puis, il y a les deux premiers, ils y vont, et puis il y a quelqu'un qui leur demande de l'aide. Oh non, j'ai pas le temps, et puis ils aident pas. Puis le troisième, c'est toujours le petit dernier Jack, qui va aider la personne, qui va aider l'oiseau, qui va aider la vieille dame qui porte du bois. Et à la fin de l'histoire, c'est lui qui reçoit quelque chose, c'est lui qui est aidé. Et moi, je trouve que dans cette histoire, dans la cabane, on voit ça. Alphonse, il dit pas, oh non, ça va me coûter quelque chose. Il dit, ah, quelqu'un a besoin d'aide, je veux les aider. Et à la fin, c'est lui qui reçoit de l'aide. Et c'est vraiment, c'est quelque chose qui se retrouve dans toutes les bonnes histoires. C'est que ça va et ça vient. Et moi, j'ai vraiment aimé ça. Et puis, je pense que les enfants, ils reconnaissent ça. Il y a quelque chose dans les histoires que les enfants, ils reconnaissent les bonnes histoires. Et puis, sans qu'on leur dise, ils voient que c'est ça comment dire, le sens des histoires, c'est de donner puis de recevoir. C'est ça qui fait tourner l'histoire, en effet.
Ouais.
Et puis moi, je trouvais que cette histoire-là, ça a vraiment ce sens-là. Même si en auteur, c'était pas le but en écrivant, ça ressort quand même. Les conteurs d'histoires, quand ça compte, il y a des traditions de contes qui ressortent, même si on n'en est pas conscient. Alors moi, j'ai trouvé, et je trouve que les enfants, ils reconnaissent ça aussi. Toutes les meilleures histoires, les histoires aimées par les enfants et puis finalement par les adultes, ces histoires qui ont ce sens de circulaire dans la vie, je pense.
Merci.
I think that brings us really to my next question, and maybe you've just answered it, Jocelyn, but maybe you'd like to add something. So I'm wondering if in translating the book, what were the things that drew you into the narrative when you were translating the book, and were there any special challenges about translating this text? Alors, en traduisant le livre, qu'est-ce qui vous a attiré dans cette histoire? Est-ce que justement ce sont ces idées de conte? Et est-ce que vous avez rencontré des défis en faisant la traduction?
Well, yeah, and to say it in English as well, the story, just when I first read the story in French, it appealed to me because I very much got that sense of traditional tale, of les conteurs, les contes, stories that were told around the fireside, stories that have been told by people, throughout humanity. It's very universal in that sense. The story appealed to me because it had that universality. It's about ice fishing. It's about an ice shack. Mm-hmm. It's about something that's very Canadian and that many Canadians can relate to across the country. But it's also very much something that anybody could read anywhere. Mm-hmm. And they would see the patterns that show up in stories all over the world, that show up the circularity of stories and the giving and the taking that happens. And from the point of view of a folklorist, and I could go on for way too long about this, but it has those elements that appeal to children, but also appeal to adults. Somebody does something good and is rewarded for it. And it's a teaching. It's teaching that, yes, look, you can put things out there and what you put out comes back to you. And that's found everywhere. So I really love that side of it. I love the story itself just because, yeah, Ice Shack. And it's a fun story. It's a very fun story. The illustrations are beautiful. So when I was translating it, the basic problem with any translation is you want to not just translate word for word. Anybody can do that with a dictionary. You want to get the sense. You want to make sure that you're being true to the author's words and presenting what they are trying to present. So you won't use the exact same phrase or the exact same word. You're going to use something that works in the language that you're translating into, that works in English, that gives the same sense of the story as what was said in French. So that was a challenge. To make sure that I was getting that, because I wanted to stay as true to that feel. I want people who read the story in English to get the same feeling that I got when I read it in French, that it was, it was fun, but it also had these deeper, not obtrusive, not like right in your face, but deeper moments of like, oh yeah, this is why this works like this. So it's trying to balance that out, like the folklorist in me going like, okay, you gotta keep this story, and then the reader in me going like, this is a great story and I want to make sure I do justice to it and really get the sense of the story so that a kid can pick it up in English and go, oh, this is super fun, the same way they would if they picked it up and read it in French. I hope I did that.
And this exactly, if I can just chip in, this
Yeah.
is exactly how I felt when I listened to it for the first time a few minutes ago. I really felt like Jocelyn really understood what I was saying,
Oh,
you know,
good.
like the feeling I wanted to convey
Right.
and the emotions. And to me, it was really like, I mean, it was an aha moment. It was just beautiful. I thought your words were perfect, Jocelyn.
Oh,
And
great. Thank you. Thank you.
merci beaucoup. And she, you know, she put some, like she didn't translate word by word. She translated ideas, and you know, just the little sentence that you came up with "ça pris sourcil." You know, sourcil is the
Yeah.
and it's really funny what you came up with. And I was like, I was wondering, how are they going to translate that? And
Gibbering.
so this is beautiful. I think it's a gift to an author, you know, to be translated by somebody that's, you know, so talented. So I'm very.
I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
I guess that's the nice part about being the author, is that once the book is written, you've done your job and you don't have to worry about how it's going to be translated, because that's Jocelyne's work.
Yeah, but at the same time, it can be a bit daunting, because if it's not translated well, then, you know, especially if you're bilingual or trilingual, then you realize that your message is not going through.
It's not going the same.
And there, I could really, I mean, when she read, I was like, oh my God, this is absolutely perfect. You know, I love it. I'm so blessed.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that I made that. I'm glad that it happened. That's what I was aiming for.
Terrific. So just to go back to the story again, Alphonse, he tries his hand at being the best fisherman, but it turns out that it is storytelling that he's really good at. So I wonder what the book tells us about storytelling as a practice. Alphonse voudrait gagner le concours pour le meilleur pêcheur, mais en fin de compte, on voit que c'est un conteur exceptionnel. Que nous apprend ce livre concernant la tradition des contes et la pratique de conter?
Je suis certaine. Jocelyne, je vais commencer, mais je crois que tu vas avoir des choses très intéressantes à dire pour être une folkloriste et t'y connaître beaucoup sur le sujet. Mais pour moi, en fait, quand j'ai écrit cette histoire, une des choses que je voulais montrer, c'est que parfois, on a des idées, on a plein de rêves. Moi, j'ai toujours eu la tête remplie de rêves depuis que je suis enfant. Et parfois, nos rêves changent. Des fois, on se connaît assez peu. Et quand on vieillit et qu'on réalise des choses très différentes, on réalise que c'était là notre vrai talent, qu'on ne connaissait pas au départ. Et mon Alphonse, qui veut être le meilleur pêcheur, et on voit que c'est un être absolument génial. Il construit sa cabane avec plein d'amour, il lui fait attention, et il veut vraiment devenir le meilleur pêcheur. Mais finalement, souvent, ce que j'ai remarqué dans la vie, c'est que on ne se fait pas beaucoup encourager à devenir ou à essayer des trucs qui sont un peu plus artistiques. Bien souvent, on va se faire amener dans des métiers qui sont beaucoup plus concrets. Et dans l'histoire d'Alphonse, ça m'amusait d'amener l'idée que parfois, il y a des métiers artistiques auxquels on n'a pas pensé, dans lesquels on est excellent. Et c'était l'idée pour Alphonse, c'est-à-dire qu'à la fin, finalement, il n'est peut-être pas le meilleur pêcheur, mais ça ne dérange pas, parce qu'en fait, il est le meilleur conteur. Et qu'est-ce qu'il y a de plus merveilleux dans une assemblée, dans une famille, dans un groupe ou même en classe, parce qu'on le sait, il y a toujours un conteur dans une classe à l'école ou dans une famille. Et pour moi, c'était une façon de rendre hommage à ces gens qui nous entourent et qui, quand ils vont être avec nous et qui vont entrer en discussion, vont se mettre à raconter des histoires, mais de façon absolument formidable, tellement qu'on aurait goût qu'ils passent la soirée à discuter. Et donc, pour moi, c'est un peu un hommage à ces gens-là. Je n'ai pas vraiment ce talent de conteuse. Moi, je compte avec mes mots. J'ai besoin d'écrire pour pouvoir bien compter, alors que les vrais conteurs, ils vont raconter des histoires et ils vont nous tenir vraiment par le bout du nez pendant 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 heure parfois avec leur façon de compter. Et donc, pour moi, c'était une façon de rendre hommage à ces gens-là qui sont formidables et plus largement encore à la communauté artistique qui nous apporte tant dans une société.
Super. Jocelyne, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I do, because from what Katia has said about conteurs, storytellers, the idea of storytelling and, you know, storytelling versus words, versus storytelling as written down versus storytelling like a conteur, a vieux conteur like Émile Benoit or somebody like that would sit and do, sitting in a group and telling a story. I find that storytelling in this way with this book is there's still that very much that element of storytelling. I could see this story, I could see somebody taking this story and they could sit around with a bunch of children and tell them. They wouldn't need to have the book. If you know the story, and the beauty of storytelling in the tradition of conteur is that you can make it bigger or smaller, you can change it to suit the audience and to suit the context. So having a solid written down book, I think, doesn't take away from the storytelling tradition. I think it's another aspect of storytelling tradition. The oral tradition of conteur is one part, but the written tradition, especially with books for children, I think draws on that far more than, you know, a novel, an adult picking up a novel to read. Katia, when you were reading your book, you had a lot of those elements in there. Even though you're reading from a book, you know, and showing the pictures, you're talking to the audience, you're, you know, the facial expressions, and you're like, oh, this kind of thing. That's part of the storytelling tradition, whether it's written down or in a conte or in, you know, in a context of kitchen storytelling moment. I think that this is part of the evolution of storytelling in that sense. And the story itself, as I said earlier, it's very much in that tradition of the stories of people who would go, Jack, Bill, and Tom, who would go, and, you know, there were some who helped and some who didn't. And, you know, the helpers in the story, they get help themselves. So that teaches a lesson, like go out there and help. But it also teaches that, you know, you will be helped when you need it, and that it brings good things to put that out there. So there are so many elements of the tradition of storytelling, les contes, just in this one book, just in this, you know, just in this little context right here. I could, as I said, I could go on for hours about it, because I feel it really does have a lot of that there. Storytelling has changed so much. Even like we're on Zoom and we're telling a story that is going to be, you know, children can get on with their parents and watch us reading the story in whichever language or both languages. That's part of the storytelling tradition now, because that's all we can do. I can sit down later with my child and read the story to him, or maybe just, you know, sit on the couch and tell him the story without having the book in front of us. So the ability to morph into what it needs to be, to find its place in the context that it's in, is a really important part of storytelling, and it's what I think of as being part of the, like, people think, oh, storytelling, nobody storytells. Yes, they do. They do it all the time. Mm-hmm. Like I told you a story about going ice fishing with my mother. We're always storytelling. So I really like this book for so many reasons, not just because I translated, but both the French and the English. I like them because they do that. They tell the story in so many ways, and they fulfill that storytelling tradition. They maintain it and they keep it going. So
they do. And I think we should just acknowledge again that these beautiful illustrations that add a whole other dimension to the story.
I love them.
Their vastness of scope. they're very expansive. They're big pictures,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I can add to that, Claire, actually something that's very interesting and that's very interesting to discuss with the young readers and the kids in school is and I've got an original here that I got from Christian, and it's very interesting to note and to get the kids thinking of what are the colors used throughout the book. We're not using all colors. We're not using yellows, or we're not using oranges or greens. If you look at the color palette of this book, it's blue, red, white, and black. And this is it.
Mhm.
With those 4 colors, you don't realize it at first when you actually look at it, but you know it's different. But Christian actually chose to use only those 4 colors. And I always, when I go in schools and I discuss with kids, that's something that they can actually do with the books in arts afterwards is do a 4-color palette. Drawing or painting, and it makes them realize that, hey, sometimes you don't have to use all the colors. You can illustrate a whole book with only 4. And to me, this is very interesting. I mean, art-wise, for the kids, I think it's very interesting to discuss that with the kids in school. Yeah.
That's great. And it leads me actually to my final question, which has to do with the response of the children. So you both come from different backgrounds in the book industry. Katia is a prolific author and Jocelyn is a former bookseller and a translator editor. So based on your experiences, I wonder what you think children will like most about Alphonse's story. Vous venez donc toutes les deux de côtés différents du domaine de l'édition, Katia comme auteure prolifique et Jocelyne comme ancienne libraire et traductrice réviseur. Selon vos expériences, qu'est-ce que les enfants vont aimer dans l'histoire d'Alphonse?
Alors, Jocelyne, tiens, je commence. En fait, ce que j'ai remarqué que les enfants aiment beaucoup dans cette histoire-là, c'est le petit côté, il y a un côté humoristique, ludique, et un côté un peu... comment je dirais ça, un peu foufou. Hein? Alors, c'est quand même un peu drôle comme histoire parce que ça part d'un pêcheur qui bâtit une cabane de pêche et qui, tout à coup, il attend, il attrape rien, il s'endort sur sa chaise et quand le printemps arrive, il part à la dérive. Donc, il y a un côté très, très drôle, très absurde en quelque sorte, absurde. Et les enfants aiment se faire surprendre comme ça. Donc, en fait, du début à la fin, on ne sait pas où Alphonse s'en va. Il n'y a pas un enfant qui peut dire « Ah oui, la prochaine page, c'est là où il va aller », parce que le livre vraiment s'en va littéralement à la dérive. Cette histoire-là va à la dérive tout au long. Donc, l'effet surprise pour les enfants, je pense que c'est quelque chose qu'ils aiment et peut-être que Jocelyne va pouvoir parler aussi des répétitions dans l'histoire, un peu, ça ajoute un certain rythme, mais si je n'ai qu'à parler des valeurs, je crois que les enfants se reconnaissent dans les valeurs de générosité dont Alphonse fait preuve. Donc, je crois que ça, les enfants, ils se reconnaissent là-dedans parce qu'ils le savent que quand ils ont donné quelque chose, partagé quelque chose avec un ami, ils ont ressenti ce bonheur-là que ressent Alphonse aussi. Et donc, pour moi, je crois, en tout cas à date, c'est ce que j'ai vu avec les lecteurs, c'est ce qu'ils retiennent. À la fois le petit côté absurde, rigolo, et le côté, c'est vraiment quelqu'un de gentil, Alphonse.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with kids with the book since, of course, it came out in the middle of the pandemic. But I sold books for many, many years. I worked in bookstores for many years. And I know what kids do enjoy about books like this. First of all, the illustrations will, of course, because they're fun. They're fun illustrations. They're silly. I mean, Alphonse, I love Alphonse. I mean, look at him. I love him. He's so much fun. He shouldn't be sawing that edge of the board. But that's the sort of thing a child's going to look at that and they're going to be like, what is he doing? They find that interesting. They're going to love the images. A little bit older, they're going to like the repetition. They are going to like that every time he asks the same question. Hey ho, what's going on? And the a jump in Jiminy's, that sort of thing, the repetition, kids love that. They like to know that that's what's coming. They like the sense of they can relate to the story right away. They're like, oh, I know what he's going to say next. So they like that sense of knowing what's coming next. But as you said, they also enjoy not knowing what's coming next. Like, where is he going? His ice floe is getting smaller and smaller. Where's he going to end up? And I think that fun side of it too, because as an adult, I'm also reading it going like, where is this going? So I think kids really do enjoy that sort of surprises, like they don't expect the whale to come up. Well, maybe they do eventually, but that's really interesting to them as well. And the story, it's a fun story. As you say, there's that sort of jokey kind of side to it. Like he's a silly old man on certain levels, and that's always fun. But they also see he's a nice old man. He's helping people and he's being helped. And his friends come and check on him and they're very nice to him because like, oh, he's sleeping, let's not wake him up. And there's so many elements to Alphonse that kids can relate to. And I think they will really enjoy that side of it as well. And that's what I enjoyed about it. And I'm a little childish at times when it comes to and I mean childish in a good way. Like I have a childish look at stories and books. That's what makes them enjoyable, because I can still read stories from the perspective of that childish sense of wonder and going like, oh, I wonder where he's going to go next. I wonder what's going to happen to him, because that's why you read a story. You wonder what's going to happen. And I think that's the kids are really going to like that about it as well.
And there's lots of themes in that book when you think of it, like it's
Yes.
not only ice fishing, but it's also values, but it's also the ocean life, what we find in the ocean, islands,
Curiosity,
and so I mean, there's so much that can be discussed with just that one book, in my point of view, because, in classrooms, I always, discuss with the teachers, what they can do with how they can actually use that book and make it even more fun. So like, for arts, we discuss, what they can do with, with 4 colors. And, I often, I very often have kids drawing their own ice shack, because I think it's fun. Like, how would you imagine your own ice shack and what would be in there? And so there's lots that we can do with the book. And so, there's lots of discussions to be had like with that. So, and I always see it. It's funny because one day I was discussing with the teacher, because she was saying, like I would see a play, like une petite pièce de théâtre.
Yeah.
In my classroom with that, and we were thinking, this would be something really fun, to do with a small group. Yes, I think it, and that's also storytelling, Jocelyn. If you do,
well, this is it. Yeah, they could do. It's the sort of thing that if you're at a library for reading hour, there's so many things that kids could do with that. Not just reading the story, but as you say, there's arts and crafts you could do. You could popsicle sticks and build your own ice shack.
Yes.
Make a little clay model of the fisherman kind of thing. Paintings, I mean, artwork, you could just be inspired as a child. You could be inspired to do so much with that. And with the story, it could, for a child who's never heard of ice fishing, they might decide, I need to go and learn more about this and go and use the internet to research it and find out more about ice fishing. So I wonder if they do ice fishing or similar things in other countries. Do other countries have cabane pêche, whether it's on the side of a beach, in a sandy beach somewhere, or is it, in Russia, do they have ice shacks? I don't know. I would like to know. So there's that wonder and that curiosity that it'll bring out in children, and there's so many places they can go with it to learn more and to experience it for themselves. I mean, people don't realize that one book can have so much in it. And I think, I could spend hours going on about it. So.
And what I like about kids' book, en français on dit des albums, so picture books. Why I love writing picture books is that what I like about that as a writer is that I like to have different levels of reading.
Yes.
So for me, a picture book cannot only be like a novel. Very often you're going to read only once.
Yes.
When I write a picture book, I want this story to, like, every time that it's going to be read, the person is going to get something out of it. You know, like they're going to get something different. You know,
Yes.
like either see it with different eyes, or so to me, that's what's very important in picture books, is that whenever I write, I don't want the person to read my book one time and say, oh, you know, I know the story, I don't need to read it again.
Yes.
I want my reader to say, or the parent to say, I want to read it again, because, you know, every time we read it, we understand something different in that
Yes.
story. And that's what I love about, you know, writing picture books. That's, to me, this is like a, you know, this is the fun I have, is that trying to put different layers of
Yes.
messages.
This kind of book will grow with the child. Like, you could read it to a 2-year-old. They might only just be looking at the pictures. They're listening to their parent or whoever reading it to them. They're hearing the words, but they're looking at their pictures, and they might be completely distracted by a picture of a fish and not listening to the story. But then a year or two later, they're listening more closely. Maybe they have a pet fish and they're like, oh, he's talking about fish and fishing. And maybe they're 5 and they've gone skating, and they're like, oh, could you go skating? Or is that something you do? It can grow with them.
Yeah.
There's, as you say, there's many layers to it, and each time you read it with the child, they're going to get something else. And my experience with children, they want to hear the same thing over and over again. They'll pick one book and they want to hear that book 5-10 times every night for the next 6 months. And then they might go to another book, but then they might come back to that one again. I know in my experience with my child, that's what he's done, is it'll be one book for a while and then leave it, and then come back to it again and read it again. And it's like, oh, mommy, I didn't realize that, you know, this happened that first time, because there are words he didn't know then, but he knows them now, or something like that. So there's, as you say, many layers to it, and they come out in different ways with the different children and with the readers. So it's, yeah, I think you got that one. You got that part right, because that's
Thank you.
definitely the sense I get from it when I read it. And I've read it a number of times now, and there is always that much more to it.
And you know, it's my first, Claire, you know, it's my first English translation, and I'm so happy about that. So I've had translation of some of my picture books in Turkish, Korean, Mandarin, Spanish, but this is my first English one, and I was
Nice.
That's fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
We're so happy that you're pleased with it. Pour un tout petit livre, on voit très bien qu'il y a tant d'idées, il y a tant de possibilités, d'activités. C'est vraiment illimité où on peut partir avec ce livre-là. Il me reste à vous remercier toutes les deux. Merci beaucoup, Katia et Jocelyne, de vos lectures et pour ce bel échange d'idées. Thank you very much to both of you for your readings today and for this wonderful exchange of ideas. And I'd like to thank everyone who has joined us today. Merci beaucoup à vous, tous vous qui êtes venus nous entendre, nous écouter, participer à cette activité aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for joining.
Merci beaucoup, Claire.
Merci.
Merci, Katia.
Merci.